Welcome to another edition of the Radio Coffee House Show, where Jesus meets coffee meets talk radio. And the next one starts right now. Well, hello everybody. Clint Armitage with the Radio Coffee House. Another episode coming at you. And this one is about God and if he did it to you on purpose. All right, what do I mean by that? Well, I caught an interview of Jordan Peterson interviewing Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen TV show. And they go into the show and all that, but what I really want to focus on is where Dallas Jenkins talks about how God set him up for it. And he didn't set him up by giving him success after success after success. He gave him a huge failure that set him up for success. And so that's where we have to question, like, wait a minute, did God do this on purpose in order to do that, which was a blessing in disguise, right? So that's what this episode's about. We're going to be talking about God's purposes, God's calling. They actually go into this dialogue back and forth throughout the show, so you can't really get a full story from Dallas regarding his background and this point that I'm trying to make. So I just took a portion of that interview and then I'm going to add on to it. But when you listen to the audio clip, you're going to hear a little bit of the backstory and the setup for if God does things on purpose to make you fail in order that you could win. Interesting thought, isn't it? Did God do it on purpose? Well, let's check out what he has to say.
So why don't you start at the beginning of the vision for the series and the ambition for the series and just tell the story, because lots of people who are engaged in this podcast won't know it.
It was birthed from failure. So for coming up on 20 years leading up to 2017, I've been a filmmaker for that long. I've made several films with varying degrees of success, but all independent, outside of the studio system. That's what, when you hear the term indie film or independent film, it means not financed by the studios. And so I had varying degrees of success, but I was very eager to make a film that was either financed or affirmed or endorsed by Hollywood. And I finally got a chance to do that in 2016. It released in 2017. So January 20th, 2017 turned out to be the lowest moment of my life, or at least my career, because the film that I had gotten a chance to make released in theaters around the country with several big Hollywood studios attached and working on it, and it completely failed.
And that was which film?
It was called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you haven't heard of it is part of the reason why it didn't do very well. So what happens is on a Friday afternoon, a math equation takes place. The numbers come in from the East Coast, and you can then decipher how a movie is going to do that day, how it's going to do that weekend, and most often how it's going to do for the life of it. And within a couple hours, I went from being a filmmaker who had a very bright future to a filmmaker with no future, because the movie bombed. The other stories that we were hoping to tell with these companies, the companies said, no, never mind. Clearly we don't understand this audience, this approach, the kind of faith-based filmmaking. And so out of that, I was home alone with my wife, Amanda, and we were crying and praying and confused because you hear all the time, God's not the author of failure. And so when you fail, you must assume that the calling that you thought you'd received to do this work must not have been a true calling. You know, anytime we feel called to something, it's hard to decipher sometimes whether it's a calling from God, or a temptation, or just a desire, a fleshly desire. And sometimes it's a fleshly desire and it's okay. It's not, you know, when we choose what we're going to eat for dinner tonight, I don't wait for God to reveal it to me. I just have a desire for something and it's fine. But I had spent, 2 years of my life developing this story and seeing so many moments throughout that where doors were opening and God clearly seemed to be present. And so then when it failed, I thought, I guess I was wrong. I guess God wasn't present or wasn't calling me to this. And so in the midst of my devastation, Amanda came to me and said, I feel very strongly and clearly like God is putting it on my heart. Open the story of the feeding of the 5,000 in the Gospels. I don't know why. I just know that that's what we're supposed to do. So we open the Bible to the feeding of the 5,000, a story I've heard many times before. I've been a believer as long as I can remember. So what about that story was for us? Well, the thing that we noticed in that story was that Jesus had been preaching for several days. The disciples come to him and they say, Master, the people are hungry. We need to send them home to get food. And what I hadn't noticed before in the story was that Jesus didn't say, oh, good point. I hadn't realized that. We should get this taken care of. He already knew it. In fact, it was his fault they were hungry. He'd been talking for 3 days. And his response was, oh, no, we can't send them home because they're so hungry they'll faint along the way. So we realized in that moment, just because you're at a place of hunger and desperation doesn't necessarily mean that God's not in it. And in fact, it may mean he is in it. Depending on your theology, he either allowed it or he caused it. But being brought to that place of hunger and desperation doesn't necessarily mean that God...
You're being abandoned.
Right. It may be.
Or even necessarily that you were wrong.
Why did God tell the Israelites to camp out at the edge of the Red Sea? In advance of the Israelites being pursued by the Egyptians, he said, go to the edge of the Red Sea and camp out. He put them in this place where they had no place to go. When the Egyptians came and pursued them, they had no escape. And he put them there on purpose. And he says 3 times in a span of several verses, so that I will get glory.
Okay, great insight by Dallas there. So what's your thoughts on that? Have you ever been in a position where God has put you in a place where you felt like you have failed? I know I have, many times, where I swore I was following God's lead on something. I swore I was following his lead on something. And then I fail going through with it. Or I put myself out there, or I risk something and I fail. Or it doesn't work out, or the door closes. There's some times where I really felt like God was in it, like he had to be in it. The things that happened and the circumstances that came up and the way things worked out, there is no possible way he is not in this at all. And then the door closes and it all shuts down. And I think, what the heck did I do wrong? Or I think, why would God do that? Why would he set me up to fail? Then you start doubting yourself. Like, did I do something wrong? Okay, he told me to do this, this, and this. Did I do it? Did I do it exactly the way he told me? You start rehashing what you did in order to find out, wait a minute, did I hear God wrong? Or did God actually fail me? No, he doesn't fail. So I had to have done something wrong. I must have taken the left turn when he said take a right turn. I must have not did something he told me to do. And you start questioning yourself and you start going over things, rehashing things over and over in your head. And you can go a little nuts. I know I have in the past, trying to retrace my steps to find out what I did wrong. I had to have done something wrong. I had to have. But that's before I started realizing that sometimes we need to fail in order to win. I also realized that in order for God to redirect us, he gives us problems, right? We think we're on this right path. And God's like, yeah, you're on the right path for now. But then we get comfortable, right? Or we think, okay, no, God's telling me this. And we get into something and we get used to something. And then he changes it. And how does he change it? With problems. Why? Because we never change things ourselves when we don't have motivation to do it. And most of the time, our motivation comes from being uncomfortable. We don't move when we're not uncomfortable. When we're comfortable, we sit and stay and enjoy, right? It's like your favorite couch, your favorite chair. Guys usually have a favorite chair. And when we're sitting in that chair, man, don't bother me. I don't want to move from this position. I remember when I used to take naps in hammocks. I used to love sleeping in hammocks because I loved the position. I mean, just the wrapping of the hammock, laying down and just suspended in air. Man, so comfortable to take a nap. I didn't want anybody to bother me during that time because I enjoyed it. And I would have stayed there the whole time, all day if I could. But no, I have responsibilities. I can't stay in a hammock and sleep there forever. So I had to do something. I had to get up. And that's the way we are sometimes. We get complacent or we're trusting in something that either God has led us to, given us, or provided, and then now he's taking it away. Or we think he's leading us in a certain direction and then he just changes the direction. Or a problem comes and we change the direction. Why? Have you ever thought about why you do that? Why we think like that? Why that happens? It's because God is trying to redirect us. Sometimes he'll take us in a certain direction to get us to a certain point, and then he changes the direction. But we won't know that. We won't even think about it until we're uncomfortable or something happens to us. A problem arises. Then we start thinking. Then we start opening up our minds, and then we start talking to God about it. Oh, Lord, what's going on here? There's this huge problem. I can't take care of it. What are you trying to do? What am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. That's when we start opening ourselves up to God's leading in a different direction. Because if he didn't do that, we would stay down that same comfortable, content path until the end. I remember I worked this one unit in my job for only a few years, but man, I told myself, I'm going to retire in this position. I'm going to retire in this job. And I was prepared to literally go another 10 years in that job without getting promoted because I enjoyed the job so much. But the problem was I was getting so complacent about the position itself that I was willing to not get promoted, not make more money, not advance my career just because I was so satisfied. But I don't think God wanted that for me. And so something happened to change it, and it was uncomfortable. The unit got cut. Budget cuts happened, and they cut that unit. All my buddies in the unit, we got transferred out, administratively transferred. Then I got transferred to a unit that I hated. Oh man, I hated that unit. But that's when I started opening myself up to God and asking him, Lord, what do you want me to do? What's happening now? I don't like this. Can I do something different? And my heart and mind started to open to God and started to plead with him and ask him where he wanted me to go. That's the only way I would have left that unit, was if that unit got cut, because there's no way I would have done it on my own. Only when the problem came where it got cut, I had no choice in it. And then I got transferred to a unit that I despised, not the people or anything. It's just the work was not my cup of tea. The type of work just was not for me, and I knew it. And I knew I wasn't good at it, and I didn't like it at all. And so after that, I was clawing my way. I was trying to get out. Why? Because I didn't like it. I was uncomfortable. And so I opened myself up to God. And within 3 months, I was able to get another position, which I enjoyed. I loved after that. But that's what it takes sometimes. It just takes us being put in a position where something happens to change our direction. And that could be God, like Dallas Jenkins was talking about. He failed, but it helped him open up his mind to what God was trying to do and tried to say to him. And that only would have happened if that was a failure, which it was. That project was a failure. If it was a success, he would have never been thinking. He would have been on that same path, going down the same road, and then he would have never moved forward with what God wanted him to do. He wanted him to put together and create The Chosen. And it's a huge success, and he's so good at it. But he had never thought about doing it to that extent until he thought he failed. So yeah, God did that on purpose in order to change his direction. And it reminds me of Elijah, when he announces that great drought to King Ahab. So Ahab doesn't like Elijah because Elijah always comes with bad news for Ahab, because Ahab does not follow the Lord at all. Horrible king. And his wife Jezebel, horrible queen. So anyways, Elijah is announcing this great drought that's going to happen. And he goes up to Ahab and he says in chapter 17 of 1 Kings, he says, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." So he gives them this prophecy, right? And then it says, in verse 2, it says, "Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply food there." So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. This is where I want to focus in on when God does things on purpose, because see, God led Elijah to that brook. And he also told the ravens to provide food for him. He told the ravens to bring bread and meat twice a day for Elijah. And then for drink, he just had the brook that was down there. And that's why the Lord told him to go to the brook. But look at what happens in verse 7 here. It says this: "Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zarephath, in the region of Sidon, and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? As she was going to go get it, he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar, and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home, make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as what you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. And then make some for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. And she does this, and then God blesses this lady through Elijah. So she went away and did as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and her family. For the jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry, in keeping with the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. So see, God answered the woman's prayer, helped the woman because she was going to eat and die. She was ready to die. That's her mentality at that time. But what happened? God used Elijah to meet up with her. It was a God-appointed meeting for Elijah to meet with this lady. But Elisha would have never met with her, and miracles would have never happened between them, and she would not have seen the Lord's provision for her and her family unless Elijah showed up. And there was no way he would have shown up if he would have stayed at the brook. If the ravens kept on bringing him meat and bread every day, and that brook was still flowing, and he still got his hydration from the water in the brook, he wouldn't have to leave. But it wasn't God's plan. But God did tell him to go there in the first place. And he provided for him, but then he dried up the brook. And sometimes we need our brook dried up so that we will open ourselves up to God so he can speak to us, so that we can go and head in another direction. Another direction that he wants us to go in so that we can bless someone else. Remember, it's all about the gospel. It's all about the good news. It's all about going out and speaking to people, experiencing things with people so that God gets the glory. You see, that's what it's about. We can't stay focused on ourselves. We can't stay in our own little bubble, in our own little world. That's not how God does it. That's not what God wants us to do. He wants us to take part in what he's doing. And what is he doing? He's telling the whole world about himself. And he says, hey, you want to play? You want to participate? All we have to do is say, yes. Let me know what you need me to do. Let me know what you need me to say. Let me know where you need me to go. We have to take those steps. But sometimes we're stubborn. We'll pray, Lord, use me. Lord, help me to speak to people about you. And then we get all irritated when he does something in order to get us to move because there's change and it disrupts our life. Sometimes he's going to dry up that brook. We have to understand that. If we are truly here to serve him, to glorify him, we need to be prepared to do what he wants us to do when he wants us to do it. Because on the other side, there's a blessing. Just like with Dallas Jenkins. He was called to make this movie. He felt like that was his purpose, and then he failed. But that was God that set that up. And then that opened him up to follow God's direction in another path, on another path. And now he's doing what God wants him to do now. God may shut it down again. God may shut things down that look like it is so productive, but then go, nope, somewhere else. That's his call. That's his choice. We have to stop holding on to what we believe is our path and our way. It's all about God and his way. Surrender to him. My name is Clint Armitage. This is the Radio Coffee House. Thanks for coming back. And until next time, stay safe and God bless. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Radio Coffee House Show, where we're all about Jesus, coffee, and radio. We'll see you next time.